Yo guys, don't burn yourself in this video because these takes are hot. Welcome my friends to another Alliteration gaming video, and I'm sure as you can see by the title and by what's on the screen right now, I have a very hot and spicy one for you today. Yes, the tier list was simply not hot takes, simply not spicy enough for me. I had to go and put my foot in this pool as well and tell you guys what I think is broken about this game and how it should be fixed. So basically this video is going to be kind of a culmination of a lot of conversations I've had over the past couple weeks in general with a lot of great people about what I think is kind of like unfun, negative, oppressive, etc., you know, all those negative connotations used to describe a meta in our meta right now. And it's going to kind of be me going over how I would fix and or address each of those individual things to try and create a healthier and more fun, positive game state. I want to disclose that I don't think our meta is broken by any means. I actually think it's like fairly balanced, all things considered. It could certainly be a lot worse, and I've seen a lot worse in other games, other metas, etc. But I do think there's some things that are running a little rampant that could be looked at, and that's kind of what I just want to like visit and go over today and just try and at least like spark this discussion, because I think it's something that could at least be talked about. So I've got 5 changes that I want to propose to try and quote unquote fix things, and to basically give you a brief overview, it's going to be 2 character card changes, 2 non-character card changes, and then 1 kind of living game rule global change. It'll make a lot more sense once we get there, but don't be too scared. It's not anything super drastic. It's just something I think that would promote the health and longevity of the game. Let's get right into our 5 changes. The first thing we're going to go over is too much hops. Yes, of course, naturally, as she is pretty much the most competitively decorated character and one of the strongest in the game, if not the undisputed strongest. Suyu Asui, aka Froppy, is the first card that I want to look at. Froppy does a lot, right? She's got 2 extremely strong enhances on both players' turns and not limited in any way whatsoever in how many times you can do them. So what am I proposing for Froppy? So Froppy, I kind of have 2 angles I would like to attack Froppy from. One, make her limited, make her power level on both sides of the equation a little more limited, or put all of her power in one side of the equation. So for Asui, I want to propose making both of her enhances either once or twice per turn. That would be kind of a thing for the game designers to test, right? And then figure out from there. Make them either once or twice per turn, or leave them unlimited and make them only your turn. Or potentially even some combination, you know, maybe twice per turn your turn, depending on how strong they feel like Suyu still is. So basically the goal of this change is I want to either limit the fact that she can just play the entire turn without progressive, with no questions asked, or I want to limit her ability to do these things defensively as well. Being able to kick out her attacks when she blocks with them from her card pool. So even nullifying defensive progressive is extremely powerful, and also turns on crazy stuff like amphibious and frog kick during the opponent's turn, which I think is just way too much for a character to be doing. So I either want them to no longer be on both players' turns, or let her do that crazy stuff, but only let her do it either once or twice per turn. Or again, potentially some combination. I could see a your turn twice per turn being like the hard limit on things, if maybe they felt like either side wasn't enough. And given how we've eroded in the past, looking at stuff like Kirishima, I think especially when they're so dominant in a meta, not that Suyu is as dominant as Kirishima was, but she's very powerful. I think it might be better to just kind of go for a bit of an overcorrect here rather than an undercorrect, and then if it was too harsh of a nerf, we can go back and, you know, give her a little bit more power. But for the time being, the change for Suyu Asui that I would propose would be making both enhances twice per turn and your turn only, thus limiting her defensive capabilities as an extremely aggressive character, and then also taking away the full unlimited power scale ceiling of her aggro. And so that's my changes for Suyu. Next, we have the bird. Yes, too much stand power. So Tokugami is a very interesting case, right? Because his character card doesn't actually do a whole lot. It's a combination of he gives just a lot of free damage and then finds this very powerful action card that is a very critical part of his game plan, and then everything else just kind of comes together. Tokugami doesn't rely on specific cards in that many senses. It's more so just like we find any attack we can play, we use our cards to like summon our shadow to play it for free, and then we just use all of our damage pump to just put a bunch of damage on it. It doesn't really matter what the attack actually does, it just kind of exists. So for Tokoyami, I feel like there's two angles you could go at him. If you want to, you can't really address his character card itself because it just doesn't really do much, right? So for Tokoyami, I was between two things. I was like, we can either just like ban Crow and Frog, which is a pretty scary thing. I don't want to just be like super ban crazy with cards, even though errata can be a little messy sometimes. I think there's sometimes a more diplomatic and necessary solution to just banning cards. So I was like, okay, we either will ban Crow and Frog or we can errata Dark Shadow. I would simply like Dark Shadow to not be playable if you've already played an action card this turn. So basically limiting Tokoyami to one Dark Shadow a turn, which I think makes him much more reasonable of a character. It means he needs a lot more than like 3 or 4 foundations to just actually like put 50 damage on board. Because when he can't play the second Dark Shadow, he has to play like, he can play 1 attack, Dark Shadow, 1 attack for free, and then everything after that has to be super honestly, unless he's going like, Crow and Frog, or like Crow and Frog, Dark Shadow, Ruin, then summon Dark Shadow. Then he doesn't really have much progressive, but he still has a little bit of it, and he has to continue working with it from there. For me, it's the second Dark Shadow that really puts it over the board. And then it also limits his playability of using stuff like his other powerful action cards, especially under the fire symbol, like Evil Gaze and like Sugar Rush Power Up. Because I think those cards are okay in their own right. They're very, very powerful cards, don't get me wrong, but I think they're okay on their own. Combined with Tokoyami though, I think it's a little too much going on all at once. But if you feel like that's too strong, I could very much see them just deciding to go with only playable if there is not a Dark Shadow in your card pool, or if there's not an action in your card pool. You can play other actions, there just can't be one already in your card pool, right? So I could see something like that, right? I just think getting that +3 to the check more than once a turn in the early game, it's just way, way too oppressive. It helps him put out too much aggro before the point where any player, any deck can reasonably begin blocking really efficiently. So I just think it's a little too much, too fast. So I'd rather him only being able to play 1 Dark Shadow once per turn. It's also very thematic, right? Because Tokugami himself only has 1 Dark Shadow, right? So I think that is the change I would propose to Tokoyami that I think would probably bring him in line. It's great because it doesn't necessarily up his risk any. It just brings his ceiling in the early game in line a little bit because it lets him, need to be a lot luckier to be able to play that many attacks early on without finding multiple Dark Shadows. So that is my Tokoyami change. Proceeding to the third change, we have too much lashing. So I know it probably looks like I'm really dogging on Froppy right now, but honestly, this is more a nerf to the life symbol overall, but it's definitely quite a big nerf on Froppy herself as well. So Frog Lashing I think is just one of, numerically speaking, one of the most illogical cards in the entire game. By readying 2 face down foundations is effectively a 3 diff with no damage cap, so let's just say it's a 10+ damage move because it's almost never less than that, and you're the one who has all the control over it. And under all of those symbols, you have so many flip costs and things that find your flip costs, and especially on Froppy herself, your flipping is on your character, so let's just say it's always a 10+ damage move. You're effectively looking at a 3 diff, right? 3 diff because it readies 2. A 3 diff, 10+ damage move that's also a 1 mid block with breaker 1 and then has the ranged keyword on it. Numerically speaking, this card just does not make any sense. Like, Frog Lashing, it's just a really crazy card. I said that about a lot of cards, but this card actually just breaks a lot of the balancing rules of the game when you start to think about it. Sometimes it's even better than like a 3 diff, because if it's like on a 6 and you check the 5, you commit 1, ready 2, you actually go plus in ready foundations in order to play your 4 high for a million. Doesn't quite simply make any sense in any sense of the scale of the scale and balance of the overall card design. So for Frog Lashing, I am proposing a hard ban on Frog Lashing. I do think there's some changes you could make to this card to possibly make it balanced in some way, but a kind of a philosophy I went into when it comes to banning things in this game, which is something that a good friend of mine, Matt, being a big part of one of these major discussions regarding all of this, proposed, is that if you have to change more than 2 lines of text or more than 2 abilities on a card, if you have to make more than 2 global erratas on a card, it should probably just be banned, which I totally agree with. There's not one change I can make to Frog Lashing that I think brings it in line. Even if you take out the ready 2, I don't think it balances it. Cap on the damage, I don't think it balances it. If you make it a 6 diff, I don't think it balances it. If you make it a 2 check, hell, even a 1 check. I think Frog Lashing would be played as a 1 check. It would definitely get played as a 2 check, maybe as a 1 check. That might be a little bit more of a stretch, but then I think that just, I don't know, I don't like that as a design change on the card. I feel then it just makes it a really, really sacky card, which is like not what it was ever intended to be. For Lashing, I'm just proposing a hard ban, which is also just kind of my overall nerf to the life symbol itself, and then also just kind of, you know, puts a little more damper on Froppy as well, which I think if we were to do all of these things, if the Frog Lashing was going to get banned, I think simply either the twice per turn or the your turn nerf on Froppy is okay. I don't think you have to do both combined if you're also going to ban Frog Lashing. Now for our 4th change, I mean, who would have seen this coming? For our 4th change, we have Mr. Fourth Kind. We've got too much arm, man. So Fourth Kind is really freaking crazy, man. The character just does so much. He gets to cheat the rules of deck building and cheat the rules of playing cards. Like, just due to the nature of how he operates, Fourth Kind can build such an aggressively slanted deck, because he really only needs like 4 or 5 foundations at max to play like 3 or 4 moves on you, just because of the way his static effect works. And then he basically just at that point just gets to cheat being a 5-hander, because he can put so many attacks in his deck, and it really doesn't matter as long as he can just put like a few on the board. And then under the order symbol, he already gets so much draw power, so he just gets to do a whole lot of cheating. You're pretty much not allowed to go to 6 or more foundations against him unless you're going to go straight to like 9 or 10, which is really hard for a lot of characters to do, or else he'll just completely one-shot you with the once per game if he draws a solid grip, and he gets to pick up his attacks after he blocks with him. The guy just does a lot. So what am I proposing for Fourth Kind here? There's ways you can make this character balanced, but I am honestly all for proposing just a hard ban on Fourth Kind. I think this character card just like shouldn't exist. I just think that the way he gets to cheat the game and break a lot of the rules is just a little silly, and I don't feel like it has a huge place in the game. But again, that's more of a personal opinion, so looking at it from a global standard, from a broader scale of perspective, there are some changes you could make to him. You could maybe make his once per game 8 or more foundations, that way he's only committing half your board and not like 2/3. You could potentially, you know, say the 4th card you try to play gets -4 difficulty, or it gets +4 damage with his attack. You can make him pick between one or the other. I think there's some ways you could bring him in line. I just think overall his whole play style it kind of cheats a little too much within the confines of the game. But if you really want him to remain in the game, those are just a couple erratas you could propose to him. I would actually just like to see the character gone. And so that kind of brings in the whole line of, we have the 2 erratas I would make between Suyu and Dark Shadow, and the 2 bans I would make between Frog Lashing and Fourth Kind. For the last thing I want to bring up, it is too much throw damage. So we have to kind of backtrack here and talk about the throw meta as a whole, because this was something that was a term that was thrown about so much in the early days of set 2 reveals that people just thought, whoa, there's so many throws in set 2 that they're just going to kind of overtake the game, and if you don't have throw hate, you kind of just die. Then we kind of slowly realized that, hey, the symbols with the best throws and throw packages are also the ones with like the best throw hate. So you kind of just play those symbols anyway, play the throw hate, and then play a small amount of the really good throws. And then basically anyone who's trying to play all throws just runs into every face shield and every wall cling in the world, and then just kind of just like loses for free. People are still playing these really, really hyper aggro, like all throw decks. And even though they run into those, you know, wall cling face shield decks sometimes and just die, sometimes they get to fight symbols who have like no throw hate, and then those decks just die for free. So it's kind of a very, very debilitating matchup in that sense. And it's kind of something that I would like to see addressed, because it very much like chokeholds the meta, where if you're trying to play like a 7-hander on a symbol without throw hate, you just kind of can't really do that, because you might just run into these decks and lose for free. And like, yes, they have matchups on their own, the throw decks have matchups on their own that they lose for free, but I don't think that's a very interesting game state. It's very like rock, paper, scissors-esque, and I think there's a way to make it a little more intricate. Throws are like meant to be chip damage, right? They're meant to just kind of be like small game state progressions in a sense where like, hey, you know, we're both walling really hard, but I can get a little damage in and a little momentum. You know, they're just meant to be chips. So for my proposed throw change, that's what I would like to essentially return them to. So for a long time, the ban hammer that I was on was simply making a game rule to where you could only have 4 throws in your deck. And simply put, I wanted to change that, like stop people from playing these all throw decks, but I also didn't want them to have to just like go through and like, okay, well, let's just say that All Might 2 and All Might 3 can't give throw damage, you know? make those erratas. Sure, what happens when you print another character that, you know, does a bunch of, can give a bunch of damage, stuff like that. This is kind of meant to be like a future-proof change so that they don't have to sit there and like think about, you know, oh, well, wait, can we give this symbol another throw? Are they going to have 16 throws now? Like, etc., etc. I want to make this as easy for the designers as possible when it comes to fixing the throw issue. So for a long time, I wanted to just hard limit throws to 4 copies per deck. But the more I thought about it and the more I discussed with people, I came up with an even better solution. Simply change the rules for throws to say when this is blocked, it deals half of its printed damage, rounded up. So basically, a throw will never be dealing more than 2 or 3 damage, as they're kind of more so intended, right? The issue is when you start having these characters running around that make these consistent 6, 8, 10 damage throws, that's when it starts getting really crazy and really out of hand super fast. Now, it does make some a little worse, like basically any throws, like for example the clasp and the facepalm here, that pump their own damage, it doesn't necessarily negate that aspect of the card, because you still have to basically block it, or else you're going to take that full damage no matter what, and it definitely makes things a little weird sometimes. But I think this is the most diplomatic and easiest change that you can make to throws on a global scale to fix the throw meta issue, fix the chokehold they have on the meta, and also just future-proof everything from here on out. The designers can print as many throws as they want. They can print, you know, the craziest throws in the world. They don't have to worry about characters damage pumping throws and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, damage pumping a throw is going to be just the same as damage pumping any other attack. In fact, it's just going to be worse because you're damage pumping a very base slow speed attack. So guys, those are my 5 changes to fix the meta. Once again, I don't think our meta is terrible by any means. I think it's a pretty good meta. I just think that if you kind of pay attention, what I've essentially addressed here is my S tier in my tier list video. I have Froppy, Tokoyami, Toga here is represented by the Frog Lashing Band as a life nerf as a whole. I don't think Toga is that crazy of a character card. The life symbol is just too stable and strong overall, and she's like the best generic 7-hander to put it under. So, but I think the Frog Lashing Band seriously hurts her and the life symbol overall. But if it's not enough, like realistically speaking, Excited for Blood is probably not a card that should exist, at least not in its current form anyway. But I don't think we are errating / banning any more URs, especially not like the big money card of set 2 anytime in the very near future. So for now, this is what I would settle on as far as life changes goes, but definitely open to more of them. I could very much easily see like something like Back Alley Haymaker taking a hit, you know, something a little less heavy-handed of a strike, right? But I think for now, for the time being, this could potentially be enough. And then we have Fourth Kinda as well. And then the throws didn't necessarily make it into the S turn anyway. Again, that's just more of an issue I think they have choke holding the meta as a whole, and I think this change would just free that up. So basically we're just trying to bring the S tier in line, and then just kind of making a really, the throw change would just be a very big quality of life change on the game as a whole, and just stop this from ever becoming an issue in general. And, you know, basically saying, hey, y'all don't have to worry about printing, you know, throw hate, you know, a ton of throw hate for like every single symbol from here on out, which is a fix, but it's a fix that could take a while and still just like it's not the kind of fix that I would like to see them address this issue with as a whole. I would much more like to see them just kind of, you know, snip it while it's still young and let us just not have to worry about it in the future. So that's my 5 changes, guys. If you guys watched this entire video, thank you so much. This one was a really fun one to make. Huge shout outs to George, to Matt, to Enrique, to Lil Nate, a bunch of people who have had these conversations with me, specifically over Origins weekend. A bunch of cool people I talked to try and gather data for this type of video and for what people would like to see gone. I think there's even more still, a couple things that could be addressed afterwards, but for now I think this is what's really powerful right now. This is what you're seeing everywhere, and I think these are the changes that would kind of make the meta just way more diverse than it already is right now. If y'all have any feedback, comments, or questions, leave them down below. I'd be glad to have some type of discussion about this and see how you guys feel about your changes. Thanks so much for watching, and I'm going to see you guys in the next video. This has been Levi, and I'll talk to y'all later.